Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Kicks and Picks podcast. You notice that there are only two faces on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. You'll only hear two voices here at the beginning if you are listening on your favorite pod platform. It's Coach Steve and Scotty here with you. Scott, Nick told us he had work dinner last minute. I think it has something to do with what Lazio did last weekend. I don't know. What do you think?
Super duper suspicious. I think we were just talking before we started to record, and we knew there's something fishy going on yesterday with Nick. And lo and behold, a mysterious last second work dinner has materialized in front of our very eyes right before we hit the record button. So it's just you and me, Coach. And yeah, I think Nick is ducking us. I mean, anytime you lose to Lecce 2-1, it's a tough take your medicine. So Nick, MIA, but luckily at least the two of us can make an appearance.
Yeah, two one to Lecce when they were up 1-0, and I think it was about the 83rd minute they gave the first one. Second one was a couple minutes after that. A little poetic justice for Romanisti like myself, because the guy who scored the winning goal is Eusebio Di Francesco's son, former Roma manager, who took them to the semifinals of the Champions League before they lost to your squad about 5 years ago now. So all these little connections always make football a fun time, especially with rivalries. So Nick is not here. Scott and I are. We will start by recapping the weekend that was. We will get into our locks of the weekend, and we have a guest for you later who we'll introduce in just a bit. So Scotty, on the weekend, we went 6-4. We were up just about 2 units on the weekend, which improves our season record to 11-8-1. And that is a 3.1 unit positive for us so far through 2 weeks. How you feeling? You picked up your first win last week, and we showed some improvement overall as well.
Yeah, I did. I finally got on the board. Honestly, even the Liverpool Bournemouth pick, I took a long shot at Bournemouth plus 800. And through the first 15, 20 minutes, that didn't look too bad. Bournemouth scored first. They were definitely on the front foot for most of it, but Liverpool got their shit together, scored three unanswered, even though they picked up what some are calling a phantom red card with Alexis McAllister. But they held on to win. So although my bet did not cash, the plus 800 would have for sure been a pod record for a single pick unit spread. But that's okay. We live to tell another tale. And as you mentioned, we're up on the season, so that's really the important part. It's something to build on. And we're learning. We're learning a lot about these teams. I think this weekend in the Premier League, you're starting to see a little bit of separation now on like who of the people of the teams coming in that had higher expectations are seem at least suited to meet those expectations, and who are kind of falling short right now. I know I did my power rankings on our Patreon account, and I had I think Tottenham making an appearance in the top six. I think they are a pretty pleasant surprise under the new manager. They've certainly haven't lacked in the goal scoring department, like I think some people may have been concerned about with Harry Kane leaving. So that's certainly a big plus for them. They got to figure out their defense a little bit, but looked okay against United this weekend. I have Brentford up there right now. Don't know if they'll stay up there for the duration of the season, but so far they've been playing pretty well. Smacked Fulham this weekend 3-0. Big win, especially on the road at Craven Cottage. So
Yeah.
a lot to feel good about if you're a fan of the Bees. And then I think the real surprise right now is Brighton. Of course, they had a great season last season, but they've been selling off a lot of their key players, and almost reminiscent of kind of how Leicester got picked apart when after they won their championship. Brighton are similarly getting picked apart now. Midfield's getting sold off for hundreds of millions of pounds to different teams at chunks at a time. Defense is getting picked apart. So, but they haven't missed a beat. They're one of three teams with Arsenal and City to have all 6 points through the first two matches. So they're kind of a beacon of how some of these, I don't want to call them mid-table, almost feels disrespectful, but how some of these mid-table clubs are trying to be run. And I didn't even mention they lost their manager too. So it's not even just like they have one guy that has kind of carried them, similar to how Brentford has had Thomas Frank carry them for their whole Premier League journey. They've been doing it under two different managers at this point. So some real contenders out there. I think it's certainly something to keep an eye on. And then some guys that aren't doing so well. Chelsea, I think, has been a I don't want to say a pleasant disappointment, because I think that's a little bit mean, but there's been no shortage of stories about how much they've spent over the last year and a half, and seeing them struggle mightily to start the season is should be concerning for fans of the club. Obviously, injuries have a lot to do with it, but doesn't change the fact that if you spend £1 billion in 3 transfer windows, you should be able to weather 4 or 5 injured players. But they seemingly haven't been able to figure that out yet. But yeah, I think that's really where we're at in the Premier League right now. Anything that you've kind of noticed or you want to touch upon?
Yeah, I just want to give that shout out to Brighton. We took them as our pod lock against Wolves. I remember the number was pretty good. I think it was -110. I'm going to double check since I have it pulled up. Yeah,
Minus
minus
110.
110. We
Yep.
had them at Wolves. Solid hit, and they made it look easy. I mean, 4 goals against a Wolves team that frustrated Man U the week before. And, I don't know if that's an indictment on Man U, or, if Wolves just out overperformed against United and just had a clunker the other day. But Brighton looks real good. I think maybe the best way to call these teams, if so, not to disrespect them by calling them mid-tables, maybe non-traditional powers, because Brighton is competing with the big boys now. I don't think
Yeah.
they're going to make a push for the title. I'd be a bit surprised because the competition's so diverse at the top of the table. So many of those sides have reinforced, but I think it speaks volumes to the recruitment and the scouting of Brighton, because they sell these players like you mentioned. They don't miss a beat. They sold McAllister and Caicedo this offseason. That was 2/3 of their midfield in the 4-3-3 that deserved
And
legs to
and
play. So
Trossard was sold to Arsenal in
yeah,
January.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, and I think they just brought in 2 South American players that I didn't recognize their names. I'm not a South American soccer scout, so but I have every reason to believe that I'm sure in the next year or two we'll probably see them grow at Brighton, and maybe they're the next ones to move on. But yeah, like I said, they're kind of the model of how a lot of these emerging clubs want to be run, because they're able to find great talent out of the non-traditional markets. They bring them in for a reasonable sum. They develop them. They get the benefit of their talent, and see them climb up the table. So obviously that helps them financially, and then they turn around and sell them and make a profit, and then start that process all over again. So it's a good way to sustain yourselves when your commercial income is not at the same level as some of these traditional top 6 clubs, but hopefully over time, if they can kind of keep that up for a series of few seasons, they get a few seasons in Europe, maybe that commercial income, comes with it. And then they can kind of be a little bit more sustained, and they don't have to rely on, making sure every South American player or, Belgian player that comes in is a smash hit, right? They can kind of deal with a few misses here and there.
yeah. And I guess to make a Serie A comparison, since we cover those two leagues, it's very reminiscent of what Atalanta's done over the past 5 years or so with Gasparini and the owner Percassi, and the way they've built those sides, finding those players from non-traditional markets, selling them at high profits. A few Italian players as well, but a lot of guys that come from, Zapata and Murillo been a big part. They're both Colombian, and they've gotten guys that maybe were not on the outs with their club, and maybe not performing up to expectations, or like you said, guys that they've found, like Hoyland, right? Look at the money they just made off him going to Manchester United. Came from Denmark, played 1 season, he's going for big bucks. So I definitely think these clubs like that come from smaller cities, less traditional markets, that are going to pull in those big commercial dollars. They just have to have a good system, and those two clubs have proven to be able to do that. And now I don't know if Brighton will follow the same path. Atalanta started to spend a little money in the past few years because they're so financially stable that they were able to drop 30 million euros on Gianluca Scamacca, outbid Inter and Roma, more traditional clubs in Italy. And I'm wondering if at what point we're going to see Brighton maybe in another year or two, not splash the cash all the time like a Chelsea, but maybe here and there pick a player that's coming out of, a lower table club that is intriguing to them and fits their project well. I'm curious when that starts to happen too.
Yeah, and they can do that with top players at clubs in other leagues like La Liga, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can go into an Atletico and maybe buy a midfielder for 50 or 60 and 50, 60 million pounds, and know that he's been established in a top league, and there's a good chance that he'll succeed in the Premier League, and that you don't have to take that much of a risk. But there's still certainly room for development beyond that.
Yeah.
I think a good counterpoint, a good foil to kind of how well Brighton's being run is a club like Everton right now, who are exactly what people are trying to avoid. Even if you have some money coming in like Newcastle, where you can suddenly start to spend and hopefully move yourselves up in the echelon of the Premier League. Everton, we talked about them all season last season as being a potential relegation candidate. They've nearly were relegated the past 2 seasons. I think there's a little bit of hope that maybe Sean Dyche is quality enough manager that maybe they don't have to be in that conversation as much this year. Maybe they sit in the mid table and have some spells where they're not looking great, but they started the season in a rough shape. They had their home opener soiled by Fulham and kind of what was a smash and grab type game where I think Everton dominated possession. They had more shots on target, and Fulham managed to grab a goal in like the 75th minute or something like that. And so Everton were left empty handed. And then this weekend, they got absolutely dominated by Aston Villa. I mean, Aston Villa did not look great in their opening match against Newcastle,
No,
but
not at all.
a home match against Everton, I guess, cures all ills because they just absolutely destroyed Everton 4-0. And then they actually won today as we are recording this in Europa League 5-0. So I guess that's a nice little way to tune yourself up before a European matches is just kind of beat up on Everton. But it feels like Everton are going to be in that conversation now in the relegation battle, at least to start the season.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's the Premier League for this past week. Talking just a little bit about Serie A, they had their opening weekend this past week. Some of the traditional powers, Milan, Juve, Inter, all won pretty convincingly, I'd say, all clean sheet victories for all of our U.S. men's national team supporters. Christian Pulisic, very nice goal in his debut with Milan. I wonder how much of the Chelsea effect being away is going to help him. I mean, that'll be kind of a little bit of a experiment or something you could call it, like see him in a different environment, see if that really helps get him back on track. Atalanta 2-0 win. That's a team that we are targeting as going to be a tough contender this year for top four. We mentioned Lazio. That was a big bust on their part. They looked like they were cruising to a win. Nick had them money line, I know, in his picks. Luckily, Ciro Immobile did score their only goal, so it helped us hit one of our patron props. We were profitable there in Serie A goal scorer props. I was kicking myself for not picking the right striker for Roma to score goals because Andrea Belotti had a brace. Huge for Roma fans like myself after he scored literally 0 league goals last year as Tammy Abraham's understudy. Kind of weird to call him an understudy because he's a veteran, but his backup. And he started off with a bang. That was a Roma without Paulo Dybala and without Lorenzo Pellegrini. Ended up drawing 2-2 because Antonio Candreva turned back the clock with 2 wonder goals. So Roma dropped points, Lazio dropped points. Everybody else in the thick of things, at least in the early projections for top 4, all won. Napoli won after giving up an early penalty kick at newcomers Frosinone. Fiorentina big winner 4-1 against another newly
Big win.
promoted side
Double
against Genoa.
bet win for us too, because I think we had total
yeah.
over and we had Fiorentina money line.
Yeah, Nick had the over 2.5 in that one. Fiorentina hit it themselves, and I think the first half with 3 goals. I had Viola money line, so that was a double winner for us. Atalanta team total, that 2-0 win was big for Nick. It took them a while to break through against Sassuolo, but they got those 2 goals to hit there. We did pretty well in Serie A this weekend because our patron props, we hit 2 out of 4. We were a marginal, not marginal, but an offside in the buildup for Giacomo Raspadori from hitting a third. And like I said, if I had put Belotti in, like my gut was telling me, and not El Shaarawy, like my brain told me after last season, we were really close to going 4 for 4. So nice weekend for us in Serie A. Not as nice for Nick and my sides as there were only 2 to drop points of the bigger clubs in the peninsula. So we'll hope for better. But overall, betting wise, Serie A was pretty good to us last weekend.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. And it wasn't just that you guys dropped points. I mean, it was in the manner too. Roma and Lazio last season were pretty strong defensively, and for both sides to concede 2 goals to lower table teams, it kind of raised a few eyebrows, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was somewhat expected from your side, but it, typically we talk about Roma and Lazio, we're usually hammering the unders. So if the fact that both of those matches went over because their defenses failed them, certainly a little interesting to start the season.
I can say 95% of the time or so, Roma wins that match based on the overall gameplay in that match. It was 2 really, really nice goals, especially the second one. So the over may be a little surprising because Roma scored 2 and gave up 2. That didn't happen a lot last year, but the manner in which Salernitana scored 2, most weeks it doesn't happen. So I'm not as concerned as some people might be just by looking at the score line for sure. It was an XG of 0.14. And I mean, that says they didn't create much.
It's actually interesting. I think 5 matches in Serie A went over last weekend. Lazio, Roma, and Juve were 3 of them. Wonder how often that's going to happen this season.
Yeah, Juve, that to me was a bit of a surprise that they scored 3 goals so easily against Udinese. not that Udinese is that great. I know they sold off a little talent, and
All in the first
but
half
Juve
too.
scoring, yeah, Juve scoring 3 in the first half. It was surprising for sure.
Nick's boy Adrian Rabiot picking up the
Yeah,
third. Wonder
of
if
all
you
people,
had him as a anytime goal scorer. Probably not.
probably.
Um, and then I think the other one, I mean, Napoli got it done, but they kind of started off a little shaky. I
Yeah,
think they conceded first. I don't know, was it a penalty?
penalty kick in
Um,
the 7th minute. Yeah.
not exactly how you want to start your title defense, but they got it together. Similar to Liverpool, scored three unanswered, so they get the 3 points in the end. But yeah, definitely a little bit of a shaky start for them.
Yeah, I think they'll be a little more vulnerable this year. I think selling Kim to Bayern is going to be a bigger loss than maybe some people would expect, because the focus is so often on the attack with Kvaratskhelia and Osimhen, who scored a brace himself this week. But I think there'll be a few more goals conceded in Naples this year.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on. And I think you know it's only one match in the season, but there really weren't any like performances from any of these lower table teams that were surprisingly bad. I think they all kind of fared pretty well. Maybe you can make a case for Genoa and how they got handled at home, but
Yeah.
a lot of them put up a decent match, and we'll be interested to see how that battle kind of shapes out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And it'll be interesting to see how teams like Frosinone and Genoa bounce back from those defeats, right? That first game back at home. Genoa was more of a traditional club than Frosinone, but both got handled in their first year back in Serie after being down last year. Cagliari ended up getting a draw on the road, so they actually had the best result of the three newly promoted sides. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. I think Genoa's got enough talent to stay up. Frosinone, I have a feeling, could be that 20th place team this year.
Yeah, we didn't really see odds for relegation in Serie A beforehand, but I'm sure if they had them out, Frosinone would probably be pretty heavy.
They were the favorite to be relegated. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So it
Well,
takes us to our picks, right?
yeah, I think it's a good way to transition going from futures to picks. So maybe I'll kick things off. I'm going to go back to the well. I've taken this team 2 consecutive weeks already, so I'm going to keep going with the third. It's going to be Tottenham money line. They're plus 100 at Bournemouth. I talked about Tottenham. I have them in my top 6 for power rankings. I think the way that they've been playing is a pleasant surprise. Certainly haven't dropped any in the goal scoring department. And I think that's a reassuring sign for things to come this season. Bournemouth, on the other hand, didn't look great overall against Liverpool. They had a good first 15 minutes, but after that, the level dropped off pretty significantly. And even after Liverpool went down a man after the McAllister red card, Bournemouth never really took it to them. Usually, you'd like to see a lower table side with basically nothing to lose in that match, right? They're not coming into Liverpool expecting to come out with 3 points, but once you get a man advantage, I'd expect them to play a little bit more determined and take some more risks, but never really pressured Liverpool. So I don't see them doing too much in this one. I think Tottenham, they've scored multiple goals in each of their first 2 matches. I think that's a trend that continues in this one as well. So if you like the team total over 1.5, by all means, but Tottenham money line, even money here, I think that's a really good value. And we talk about it sometimes early in the season. Books take a little bit to catch up to how teams are playing versus their expectations. And I think this is what's happening with Tottenham. I think they're getting a little undervalued or by books right now. So as long as that's the case, I'm going to keep riding them until the wheels come off.
Yeah, especially coming off, the win and the draw. They got 4 points in their first 2 matches. When you see them at even money on against one of the, lower half clubs, I think you always have to take one of those big 6 clubs when you get that kind of number, especially if they're coming off a win.
Yeah, and I don't even know that Sun has really gotten going yet. They've gotten goals from some non-traditional names so far. Actually, I think Ben Davies' goal ended up getting converted into an own goal, but from United. But it's coming from all different parts of the squad right now. So I think they have every opportunity to get, like I said, a couple goals here, maybe 3, like Liverpool. And I don't see Bournemouth being able to keep up with that.
Yeah. All right, my first one, I'm going to the Bundesliga. One of my biggest regrets last weekend was not taking Union Berlin on Sunday morning at
Your
even
team.
money. Even money at home, and they just cruised to victory 4-1 against Mainz. I was kicking myself all day on Sunday for that one, because it's not every day you get a team like that at home, especially the way they performed last year at even money. So I'm going with them this weekend. They're at Darmstadt, one of the newly promoted sides in the Bundesliga. Money line for Union is -110. I'm going back to the well with the team that I I rode last season a lot on the way to the Champions League berth. And I like them traveling to the newly promoted side, especially coming off a 4-goal performance because they were not a big scoring team last year. So I'm hoping they got a couple of them again this week and they can cash it close to even money.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than when your like go-to squad that you rode all last season
Yep.
gets an easy win in the opening match and you just left them off your bet slip. Like it's as good
Yeah.
as a loss in some cases, really. All right. I will go to my second pick. I'm going to take Brentford versus Crystal Palace over 2.5. It's plus 105. Weirdly, this game to me screams like it's going to be under. Crystal Palace did a pretty good job against Arsenal on Monday. Arsenal were lucky to get a goal. It was on a penalty kick. Odegaard managed to convert it, but Crystal Palace defended really well. They were clogging the box. They were preventing crosses from getting into any of the runners from Arsenal's side. Arsenal couldn't really break them down, and it didn't seem like this was going to be a game that Arsenal was going to, bag multiple goals. And Arsenal is certainly more talented offensively than Brentford, although Brentford have scored, I think, 5 goals in their first 2 matches. I think that's a little bit of an anomaly, especially missing Ivan Toney. But on the flip side, Crystal Palace also had a man advantage for most of the second half after Tomiyasu picked up a red card, his second yellow. And they did not look like they were close to scoring. I think Edouard had a wide open header on goal that he put closer to the corner flag than the goalpost. So it seems like this is going to go under, but the books just don't have it that way. Like the odds just don't reflect that. Like I would have expected this to be a heavy under, and they just don't. So that tells me something's going on here. I'm gonna start to question it. Maybe the 5 goals that Brentford have scored in the first 2 matches aren't as much of an anomaly as I think they are. And maybe Crystal Palace are just waiting to break out. I mean, Eze looked pretty decent, and maybe he has a great game in him this week. But it seems like one of those games where like all of the the public money is going to go onto the under because it's going to scream under to a lot of other people, and somehow the game goes over and the books win again. So I'm going to ride that and fade my initial thought 1-5 after all, and take the over 2.5.
Sometimes you just got to go with that feeling you have, right? And I think you said something important there. I think Brentford scoring 5 goals in the opening 2 matches, including 2 against Spurs in the opener, I think has a lot to do with that. Credit to them doing it without Ivan Toney too, right? While he's being investigated for the gambling stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's credit to Thomas Frank, right? He's we talk about it sometimes like the manager makes the team, and in this case, he certainly is. He hasn't missed a beat, missing both his star striker and keeper, right? They just sold off David Raya to Arsenal, so and maybe that helps in my favor as well, right? Maybe we get a keeper gaff for Brentford that gives us a goal, one closer to the over.
Yeah, I'm going with a team that we rode the first week to our podlock, and then last week I took them getting double chance. Not getting double chance. I was going to say getting 1.5, but it was a double chance at City. Newcastle just couldn't get it done. They lost 1-0 narrowly against City. That was my first loss so far this season. I'm going back to Newcastle because they're plus 115 against Liverpool at home. I expect the Magpies to bounce back this weekend. I think Newcastle will win this match in the midfield, which is one of their strengths and one of Liverpool's weaknesses, right? Scotty's talked so much about the lack of midfield quality, and now Alexis McAllister is suspended for this one after his red card. I think that only amplifies Newcastle's advantage in the center of the park, and I'm riding the team of the pod to get a statement win here.
There is some breaking news. McAllister's red card suspension was overturned.
Overturned? But I still like the advantage, but it makes it a little trickier.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I still think the midfield advantage is in Newcastle's favor. I think you're likely to see Endo start for Liverpool this weekend, so you will see a full. I mean, I'm hoping that's the case. If they throw Gakpo back in the midfield again, then this is as good of a win as you'll get this weekend. But I presume that they'll play with a true midfield 3 this time. Bajatic was on the bench last weekend, so he might be getting closer to actually being able to play, which will help because he can play in that 6 defensive mid position. But even still, I mean, the offense for Liverpool, granted they scored 3 this weekend. Salah hasn't looked, lethal yet. He hasn't quite gotten back up to his form that I think a lot of people expect from him. I think Luis Diaz has been their best player outside of maybe Dominic Szoboszlai. But through the center, Jota hasn't looked great. Gakpo's been playing out of position in midfield. Nunez didn't really even, I think he maybe got 5 minutes last weekend. So this definitely seems like one where, if you remember last year, Liverpool snaked 2 games from Newcastle. I don't know how they managed to get 6 points from Newcastle last season, but I know that Newcastle fans have this circled, and they're certainly hoping to get revenge. So I like the pick. I'm kind of going into this match as a Liverpool fan with my guard up. All right. I will close out my hat trick of picks with the other team in Liverpool, which is Everton. We talked about how bad they looked to start the season. Two losses in 2 matches so far. They go home and they're playing against Wolverhampton. Money line Everton are plus 125. So I get it. They have not looked good so far. The problem is they have maybe 3 or 4 matches to get this turned around, because after international break, 8 of their 12 remaining matches in this calendar year are against teams that are expected to finish in the top half of the table. So if they don't get some momentum going now, it's going to be a long second half or first half of the season for them. And they're going to have to do something crazy in January to kind of turn it around, because I'm expecting them to be in a pretty deep hole. I think they do turn around. Wolverhampton looked good against United, but we haven't really talked about United. They were very close to being, having 1 point in their first 2 matches as well, just like Chelsea. So I don't know how much I'm going to read into that. They did get smacked this weekend, so maybe there's a little bit of hope for Everton here at home. Get the crowd behind them, and maybe they can pull out a win and give their fans a little bit of hope that maybe they're not going to be cellar dwellers for the whole season.
All right, I'm going with my club for this last one, Roma. Right now, they're money line minus 115 at Hellas Verona. I love this number on my boys. Pellegrini and Dybala return after their yellow card suspension that carried over from last season to join a side that really looked sharp in attack last week compared to last season. Had it not been for those 2 Candreva wonder goals that I mentioned, Roma would have cruised to an easy win. I don't see anyone on Hellas that can do the same, so I think Roma's quality will win out here, especially with Belotti looking like his old self. And on his way to the brace last week, I think Dybala adds even more danger into the attack. I thought Houssem Aouar looked really good in the midfield, helping facilitate. I think he was something they were missing last year after Mkhitaryan left. So I like the number here. I know Hellas can be tough at home, but I'm not going to pass up on my boys at minus 115 when I thought they played pretty decent last week.
Yeah, Hellas Verona. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast. We were longtime faders of them last season, and here we are again, fading them yet again. So I feel like we're really back into mid-season form already.
All right, so Nick is not here, but he did give us his 3 picks with his notes. So Scotty, we'll bounce back and forth. I'll take the first one here. It's Aston Villa money line plus 110 at Burnley. This is something I considered myself, so this is a pick I really like. He asked which Villa are we going to see. He's hoping for the one that smashed Everton 4-0. And then he wrote this before the result today, another 5-goal performance. So he says the only reason he thinks they're seeing this number is because Villa played today on Wednesday in the Europa League qualification. He's hoping the short turnaround doesn't hurt them, and he thinks playing Burnley should help. I love this number at plus 110, even if it is on the road.
Yeah, it's interesting because Burnley did not play this weekend. Their match against Luton Town was postponed because Luton Town Stadium was not yet finished and ready for Premier League action. So the only match we've seen from Burnley so far was them getting trounced by Manchester City, which is fair. I don't think anybody really expected them to get much from that game. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond. They're the exact opposite. Villa coming off of a midweek match. Burnley haven't played in 2 weeks. So a real rest versus rust type match here. Nick's second pick for this weekend, he's taking Monaco money line, which is minus 120 at Nantes. Monaco's off to a scorching hot start. They've won both of their matches so far in League One. In both matches, they've managed to score at least 3 goals, 7 goals in total. So really a strong side to kind of get on top of right now. On the flip side, Nantes has yet to win. So although they're at home, they don't really have a great showing for it. Really, at minus 120, Nick is thinking this is just too good of a number for anyone to pass up.
All right, and he's going to Spain for his last one. So he said he is the new coach worldwide this week. He dubbed me that last week last season when I went to the Bundesliga so often. So he's going all around Europe this week. He's going Valencia money line minus 110 against Osasuna. Valencia are off to an undefeated start. He says after 2 solid wins, we need to back the away side here. They're looking to stay hot and compete for top 4 this year. So he's riding them at minus 110 on the money line. So he's riding a lot of near even money bets here with sides that you don't always see it with.
All right. And that brings us to our pod lock. Our pod lock is currently 2-0. So we want to keep that undefeated going into week 4. For our third pod lock of the season, we're going to La Liga, and we're going to be taking Barcelona money line minus 105 at Villarreal. A really nice number for Barcelona. I mean, we know they started off slow with a scoreless draw against Getafe. I think that was a match where both teams had red cards. I think Barcelona picked up the first one with Rafinha, but they turned around. They had a 2-0 win against Cadiz last weekend. I think that form carries into this weekend at Villarreal. Minus 105, you're not going to see Barcelona getting that number in La Liga unless it's against one of the teams from Madrid much this season.
Yeah, I think anytime you get Barcelona at just about even money and it's against one of the sides that is not Real Madrid or Atletico, like you said, I think you have to take it. I know Villarreal is, I think, also on 4 points so far, but it took them a lot to get that goal last week to win their match, and they did lose a lot of talent this offseason. So I like this one. I like Barcelona minus 105. You always got to take a chance on them at that number. All right, so that wraps up our locks of the week. We hope to continue with our third straight winning weekend of the season to open things up and get you guys some more cash with us. And that takes us to our state of the club Napoli this week. It's Dama Puzzo. Nick took that interview, recorded ahead of time last week. So it was before Napoli's first match of the season. So if there's anything that seems a little off timing wise, that is why we held it for this week. Just for editing purposes. So State of the Club is back with the defending Serie A champs, and we'll take it to that interview now. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for joining us. And if you want to hear the interview, you can hear it on our full-length episode, either here on YouTube or on your favorite pod platform.